I heard about a man named Augustus Malway, and he was a man who grew up in a village. Said it was a village that was in tribal wars continually. He didn't even wear a stitch of clothes until he was 14 years of age. And he was a very incorrigible child. And he was a person that grew up in a house that had holes in it. Pigs slept in the house, and his parents would often invite people over that he did not like having guests. And he would sit there and glare at these people whenever they came over. And his mom eventually just told him to get out of the room completely. But he was just so incorrigible that the tribe would say, what are we going to do with this child? What are we going to do with this child? One time he got so angry that he threw a stick at his mom, missed her, and hit another child, and wounded this child in the tribe. The whole tribe meted out punishment against Malway. And what they did was they took this hot pepper soup and poured it down his nose. Now that is a disciplinary thing I hadn't thought of. Maybe it'll work in my house. Maybe Campbell will come out with a disciplinary soup that you can use. But can you imagine hot pepper soup being poured down your nose by everybody in the tribe? Well, he said it choked him, obviously, and that his nose burned for hours. And he would go out into the forest because he recognized there was something wrong with him as well. He said he would pound his head against the tree, saying, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? I should kill myself. Well, a young man came from the city, or actually came from a city that was by an ocean. And nobody in Malway's tribe had seen an ocean, so he wanted to hear what this young man had to say. And this young man not only talked about the ocean, but he talked about a house in the village by the ocean where people would meet on Sundays. And he said they'd meet in this house and they would sing and stay for a long time. And he was curious about this, and he said, why were they staying there for such a long time? And he said, well, they would be in there praying to the God of heaven, the God who created everything. And this Malway wanted this boy to teach him to pray. And this boy refused to teach him to pray, so Malway would go out into the jungle for hours at a time and try to pray. And he didn't know how to pray. Nobody ever taught him to pray. And so what he started to do was he would just talk to God as he would talk to his father. And he did that for 2 years. And finally they started building a road between his village and a big city that was nearby, the one that was near the ocean. And after 2 years of doing that, he traveled to the city, stayed with his cousin, and he heard about this place again. And he waited all Saturday night to hear that church bell ring so that he could go to this house. He went into this house where they all gathered to pray, and he sat there and he listened to a man tell him about God and to tell him about how God had sent his son Jesus to take away his sins. And his thought was, does this God know how terrible I am? If this God could talk to the people back at my village and they could tell him about me, would this God still love me? And in his heart, he understood it was true. And this young man gave his heart to Jesus Christ that morning, and he grew up to be one of the most significant men in Liberia for building and founding churches. But here he was, out in nowhere, responding to the light that he got, and God drew him closer and closer and closer, and then introduced him to the person of Jesus Christ. And here you have the Jews being confronted with the fact that God is doing a work in hearts, and that they have been given this brightest light, and yet they've taken this brightest light and they've used it as a point of condemning others rather than being the evangelist to the world that they should have been.